Love and truth, Caritas and Veritate, is a great challenge for the Church in a world that is becoming progressively and pervasively globalized. The risk for our time is that the de facto interdependence of people and nations is not matched by ethical interaction of consciences and minds that would give rise to truly human development. Only in charity, illumined by the light of reason and faith, is it possible to pursue development goals and possess a more humane and humanizing value. The sharing of goods and resources, from which authentic development proceeds, is guaranteed not by merely technical progress and relationships of utility, but by the potential of love that overcomes evil with good, opening up the path towards reciprocity of consciences and liberties. The Church does not have technical solutions to offer, and does not claim to interfere in any way in the politics of states. She does, however, have a mission of truth to accomplish in every time and circumstance for a society that is attuned to man, to his dignity, to his vocation. Without truth, it is easy to fall into an empiricist and skeptical view of life incapable of rising to the level of praxis because of a lack of interest in grasping the values, sometimes even the meanings, with which to judge and to direct it. Fidelity to man requires fidelity to the truth, which alone is the guarantee of freedom and of the possibility of integral human development. For this reason, the Church searches for truth, proclaims it tirelessly, and recognizes it wherever it is manifested. This mission of truth is something that the Church can never renounce. Her social doctrine is a particular dimension of this proclamation. It is a service to the truth, which sets us free, open to the truth, from whichever branch of knowledge it comes. The Church's social doctrine receives it, assembles into a unity the fragments in which it is often found, and mediates it within the constantly changing life patterns of the society of peoples and nations. That's an excerpt from paragraph 9, section 9 of Pope Benedict's social encyclical Charity and Truth, Caritas and Veritate, which we'll be discussing today.
Oh, which will be. I'm disappointed you didn't read it in a German accent like Pope Benedict. Could you do a Pope
I
Benedict
can
voice?
do a Pope Benedict accent. Uh,
But I don't think we need it for like four paragraphs. You just read like one sentence. Let's see how your Pope Benedict is.
see how it goes. Love in truth. Hang on. I forgot my Spanish part. Love in truth, Caritas and Veritate, is a great challenge for the Church in a world that is becoming progressively and pervasively globalized. The risk for our time is that the de facto interdependence of people. I have to warm up a little bit. This is not like conducive to a Pope Benedict accent. Either you could please cut
No,
this
but yeah,
or not.
no, I think we need to keep it, Ethan, producer Ethan. Yeah, executive producer Ethan. Because yeah, I think it's showing the human side of you. But also, I think you're maybe sitting too close to the mic because I've never heard Pope Benedict quite so forceful.
My favorite.
And so
This is a very Pope Benedict thing that we can keep in. He would always go, um, "In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti." He'd always hit his microphone
oh,
with his hand. So if
well,
that sounded annoying, you just watch videos of Pope Benedict giving blessings. The microphone would always get in his way when he was doing this 3 times to the cross. But so, Charles, we're going to talk about charity and truth. To quote someone famous, Charles, what is truth?
to quote someone famous, Pontius Pilate. Um, I think it's actually they made a song. What is love? Like they could do that. What is truth? Right? We could do a whole thing.
We have
You know
so
that
many good
song?
ideas for merch and the things that we
No
can put out. We just get AI to write
no
a
more.
song.
Well, yeah, yeah. But yes, no. I think this is an interesting encyclical because I've never read it. I'm not a big student on this, but I've lived it. Is that the way to explain it? I grew up in the environment of it. No, it's because the econ program at Catholic U, they had grad programs or I don't know, is it majors? What do you call it? Your focus, your area, your study. What do you don't major in grad school? You concentrate.
You have a concentration.
Yes, they concentrated in integral human development, which I always thought integral is something in calculus. So why?
Integrated, which is a big psychological principle of like having all these good things and living as one, not like in different silos. I I took calculus. I did really well in calculus, but I don't think I could tell you what an integral is today.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I've had to do calculus. But yeah, no, this is Pope Benedict's encyclical from 2009, right after the global financial crisis was affecting the world. It was still going on at the time. And yeah, it's because a big part of economics, particularly in DC, is a big focus on developmental economics and trying to help impoverished countries' economies get going. And so there's different thoughts. There's obviously the UN, the World Bank, IMF, right, who try to do different things, and they're based here. But the church says that's good, but that's not the whole story. Is that a way to say? Is that kind of like some of what Benedict's getting at here?
Yeah, I think he's saying that there are lots of good things that are in the world, um, but that they have to be led by charity in truth. And I think it's really right when Pope Benedict, right, it was before he was elected, right? I think he talks about the dictatorship of relativism. I think that's a big Ratzinger speech. And this idea that like, what is truth? It's like, well, there's your truth and there's my truth. And he's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Um, and this idea too, right, that you can't have two truths that contradict each other. This was a big moment in my life in high school. I was reading the UCAT, which Pope Benedict put out, and he said, faith, the catechism says, the youth catechism says, faith and science cannot contradict each other because two truths cannot contradict each other. And so this idea that he's saying the church doesn't have a solution, but the guiding principles towards the solution, um, which is the eternal truth, which is objective and clear, and is a person and became man as incarnate, is found in the person of Jesus Christ. But also that, but also in that charity, which the truth expresses, right? That charity goes beyond justice, and it includes all those principles, right, that we know and love to be successful. So this is, I think, I love this social. I'm not like a big social encyclical guy. I don't know if people who
You're an anti-social encyclical guy,
I
right?
am
So
antisocial, but that would be a fun encyclical to write. When I'm Pope, that would my first encyclical will be an antisocial encyclical.
stop talking to me.
Leave me alone. Um, the, the but I think I really like this one because I think I had to present this in class. I had to read this a number of times outside of seminary, just like in a normal university class. And I think what's great about this is it's so practical. Um, and it discusses like those real like economical issues and stuff. And I think this was a big introduction to me to like what econo economists and what the economy really does entail because it, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it is all encompassing, right? There's so many multiple factors and something. I said I was in the eighth grade the other day or whatever, and I said something about the Great Depression, and I think it's talking about credit or something. And one of the eighth graders, was like, "Isn't that what caused the Great Depression?" And I said, as I've learned, when there's an economical recession, it's always multifaceted. So did this contribute to it? Yes, but there are other reasons. And then I couldn't name the other reasons. But then I started explaining to the kids what a ninja loan was, which was a which I said is not as cool as it sounds. A ninja loan, of course, being loans that were a major part of why we had the housing crisis in 2008, which led to the recession. A no income, no job, no assets loan. Um, Again, a ninja
yeah.
loan, not what I imagined that was. Um, a loan that supports dojos and the life of the samurai, which would be way cooler. Um,
But didn't ninjas fight samurais? Wasn't that the? There's also samurai loans. You ever heard of that?
is that real?
Yeah, there are samurai loans. It's a type of loan in Japan. But yeah, we.
Actually, maybe there's a difference between ninjas and samurais, and I should know that. And I apologize. I will do research after I get off recording the show.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about. Yes. Well, maybe we can. Yeah, this is we weren't planning this before, but we can kind of give a brief overview of the global financial crisis. There's the movie The Big Short, which I think is part of the story, and then there's also the movie. There's an econ movie. Come on, the movie called Too Big to Fail. Which is another good movie to watch because there's a lot of things that went on. Yeah, and I think it's a danger in economics and really in anything in life to say everything is because of one thing or one issue or one. If we just make one little adjustment, everything's going to be fine. Because yeah, it's complicated. But yeah, the global financial crisis is that banks were they were some deregulation, which may allowed for mortgages, which is the bedrock of much of the American financial system, especially for individuals and families. It lowered the lending standards because it was looking and saying, hey, historically, you had to have certain credit scores and certain assets and jobs and income, right? The opposite of the ninja to qualify for loans. And the standards were lowered. And the interest, I think, nobly to make money, right? Because you make money on loans, but B, also recognize that certain people at the lower end of the financial security ladder weren't defaulting as much as people had thought that they would. And historically, as they said, well, why are we cutting these people out? We're being too punitive. And so let's make it easier to lend to them. And then they would package these loans up, which is securitization, and sell them on secondary markets. And the whole point of securitization is like, if I say, hey, do you want to buy the loan I have do you want to buy the ninja loan? No one wants to buy the ninja loan because it's high risk, right? But if somebody says, well, I'm going to give you 100 loans, some of them are ninja, some of them are with, really financially strong people and good, property values and all that stuff. And so, okay, yeah, some ninjas will default, but it's diversified across the thing. So they would package these up and you could buy these securities, and they were rated by the rating agencies, and the rating agencies were not always as maybe as rigorous as they could have been on some of these potentials, right? And again, I don't want to get too complicated. People are probably yelling at the TV or car radio or wherever they're hearing us because I'm missing a lot of things because there's a lot going on. And so lending standards get lowered. These were packaged, and then the banks and other financial institutions were very heavily investing in these. And then once there was financial stress that caused these to not perform, it wasn't isolated incidents. These were becoming systemic, and they were affecting banks. And banks are huge parts of the economy, as we all know, right? They're multi-trillion dollars in assets and things. And so when a bank fails, it affects a lot. And so that's what you had with Lehman Brothers and other banks going through stress, and the government having to come in and do bailouts. And so it really shook things down, and there was issues with a lot of things in a macroeconomic perspective. So I think there's plenty of blame to go around. I think some of the banks were greedy and did things they shouldn't have. They weren't looking as closely as they should. The rating agencies missed some things. The government maybe didn't have to undo all the regulations it did or the way it did. But also the assurance of a bailout. It's like, if you're going to fall and you're going to land in, there's going to be a net, maybe you do some things you shouldn't do. And also the people who took the loans, right? I hate to blame the victims, but like, just because I can qualify for a loan for like a Maybach doesn't mean Charles Bush, should buy a Maybach, right? Like, it does require some fiscal discipline. And if all of a sudden I'm, pay whatever, $14,000 a month in my car payment and I can't do that and I default, like, that's a little bit on me. And again, obviously not everyone's as financially literate, but it's all these factors which contributed to the global financial crisis. And there were other facets of it, right? There was like auto loan, similar type of issues, because the auto industry was having a lot of challenges as well. So there's a lot going on in the world economy. And so in that context, Pope Benedict said charity and truth. And I think it's kind of interesting because I think to me, at least initially, it reads a lot towards that. But when you remind yourself of what was going on in the world, or I mean, initially you think it's focused to developmental economics, which is a big part of what my day job is related to, is investing in emerging markets. But I think he's also recognizing, how do we approach people in developed markets who are going through a financial stress and how you encounter them? Because I think it's very easy as an economist to say, as long as GDP is trending upward, who cares what's going on? But and so I have here from AI a series of quotes. Do we want to run through them and share our thoughts? And these are quotes from the article, from the Pope, from Pope Benedict. But
I think you lost them with the fact that we were using AI.
oh. So AI is a part of the thing. It's, but all right. So this quote is on truth and charity. Pope Benedict says, without truth, charity denigrates into sentimentality. Love becomes an empty shell to be filled in arbitrary way. So what do you make of that, Father?
Yeah.
These are the most quoted quotes in the article.
And it reminds me of what St. Eustine said, or what Pope John Paul II said her life teaches us in her canonization homily. It's hard to, the way he worded it, it's hard to tell whether or not this is an actual quote from her. But it's the idea is, do not accept anything as truth which lacks love, and do not accept anything as love which lacks truth. One without the other becomes a destructive lie. And so we see this a lot in like how we deal with people, um, especially like if somebody like love the sinner, hate the sin, and it's become like, well, just accept whatever they do because you love them. It's like, well, no, like an analogy I use is like a true friend is the one who will tell you you have spinach in your teeth. Like that's a good friend. Like it's uncomfortable and it's awkward, but like, hey, you got to floss. Um, right? Like it's direct, but that's also like the most loving thing you can do, right? And so there's a truth and there's an order of the moral good and of the natural law that exists, and that is a part of what is the truth. And so love is inter- integral, integrated into what is true, right? And so like this whole idea of like love is love, or like somebody can live this morally irrepressible life, uh, morally reprehensible life, and we just have to accept it, right? Tolerance is not a virtue. I'm going to say this all in blue in the face. Um, Truth and love are virtues, right? So we want to say things. Um, we want to say things that are true with love, right? This is the joke in the seminary. I would say somebody to something, and he was like, "Well, that was really mean, right? It's not what you said; it's how you said it." I was like, I said the truth, so I said it with love. Caritas and Veritate." And it's like not a very good uh, social interaction. But this idea that like correcting someone can be done, and it's an act of charity, but you also have to do it with like a sense of love behind it, right? But it can become just sentimental, right? Like I I hear this a lot with, I guess, with people who have family members or friends who struggle with same-sex attraction, right? It's like you can never tell me that gay love is not the same, or like they can't be in love, or all this stuff. And it's like, but it's so much more than that, right? It's not just, it's one, it's reducing somebody to their sexual proclivities, which like nobody wants to be identified with who or what they're attracted to, right? And it's like, I'm saying this because I love them, but there is a higher truth that they're called to, that yes, they like this person and they have an affection and they take care and stuff like that, but like that's not what love is, right? And so that comes off very harsh and very brash, but it's like we're all called to something more. Like even me, right? People like I get criticized all the time. My pastor's very good at this. Of like every time he's like offered like a correction or like a point of fraternal support, I like the only response that I can say to like how he offers it is like, well, thank you. Like because it's like, yes, it's uncomfortable to mention like like how I messed up, or I could have done something better, but it's like I'm so grateful that you said that, because now I know. Before I wouldn't have known. So even I, Charles, make mistakes. I know it's hard to believe.
Wow.
It was
That's,
hard
I
to admit.
would never. Yeah. Oh, we all believe it. Don't worry.
Like
But
otters,
yes.
swim 100 miles per hour.
Yeah, they don't. So yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And so I'm just making a few notes here because I want to make sure I don't forget some of the things that you said. And what that meant. But yeah, I remember being a Dutchman at a meeting once said, the British are too polite to be honest, and the Dutch are too honest to be polite. And it's kind of true. Like, you can have, yeah, like recognizing, but I think the church at its best is both. It's polite and true, right? And so it's to recognize those notes, because you can't just kind of scream into the wilderness, "You're a sinner, you're making a mistake," and like deal with it. But you can also be like, "Oh, we're not going to call anyone from, to be better." Um, to like, I think of like with someone who's dealing with addiction, right, to like alcohol or something, and it's or food, right, or I mean, you can be addicted to a lot of things. And it's interesting because you can usually tell if somebody's starting to go on a path to addiction, because all of a sudden they get very sensitive, like any criticism of it or adjacent to it, or any, even if you weren't like actually trying to intervene, but you're like, like, "Oh, let's go to the bar." It's like, actually I have to, like, can we go to Office Max first? And like, "I need to go now." Like, "What are you doing? Where do you go to this Office Max?" And like, whatever it is, right? And so this is a conversation I've had with somebody on this
Are
podcast.
there
No.
still
So
Office Maxes?
there are still Office Maxes and Office Depots. Where do you think I'll get all my office supplies? But this is I don't know. But I'm just saying is that yeah, it's a big recognize both the two, and yeah, it's charity and truth, and it's how it's helped to help the person become better off, right? And so like, and I think to your point, yeah, like the best criticism is productive, and there's like we heard a compliment or a criticism sandwich. You heard of this?
Yes, I've been on the receiving end of many of them.
You know, you did a great job with this. Next time, do that differently, and then thanks for making the time. Whatever it is, like you always give, and particularly with I think like our generation where we got participation ribbons and a lot of positive reinforcement. Like any criticism, and myself included, can be a bit hard to deal with. So it's helpful to have that, but also to criticize privately. I think that's a really good. The church talks about this, right? And the gospel says when you have an issue with someone, go to them first, and then bring a witness, and then take it to the church. Like don't I have an issue. I'm going to broadcast it on Twitter or X or whatever, right? And try to,
Yeah, there's a
slander
big
them. It's
rule.
like
A
how,
big rule in the seminary: fraternal correction is only done in private, and it's only brought forward if it's not. Um, there's a big joke. We were in the cafeteria. It was a refectory, and it was a big public conversation. And one of the seminarians, he used to work at Chick-fil-A, and we were talking about the chicken sandwiches that the catering company's generous title for them uh, was serving us, and somebody said out loud so that everyone could hear them was, uh, you know, Chick-fil-A does this with their chicken, and we all knew that was wrong because my classmate worked for Chick-fil-A. He was a manager there, and he would always say "my pleasure" whenever you said thank you to him. It was a great. Honestly, we should make that all respond like that. But so I turned to him, I go, "Aren't you gonna correct him and tell everyone how Chick-fil-A actually makes their chicken?" And he turns and goes, "Fraternal correction is only done in private."
yes. So, yeah, but, yeah, no, I think it's a good point, right? To have that. And that's what the truth and charity is that like, yeah, serving someone is to help them and to, and like, yeah, the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. I think the corporal works of mercy, like everyone's on board with, right? Like feed the hungry, clothe the naked, yeah, bury the dead. That's my big favorite one. The spiritual works of mercy. There's two of them I really like, which I think I don't like being the receiving end of, which is to instruct the ignorant and to admonish sinners. But right, that's part of the church's things. Right, there's other spiritual works of mercy that are maybe a little less blunt. Right, I don't remember what they are. Spiritual works of mercy. Counsel the doubtful, instruct the ignorant, admonish sinners, comfort the sorrowful, forgive offenses willingly, bear wrongs patiently, pray for the living and the dead. And so, but yeah, like that's what the church from, going back a long way, modeled after the baptism, modeled after Christ. Like Christ, when he encountered with people, right, he wasn't like, oh, you're a sinner, keep going, like thumbs up, just keep, I like you the way you are. He's like, he would call people out of their brokenness and say, sin no more, right? And which gospel is with like repent and believe in the gospel. Like that's the whole point is Christ calls us from our brokenness and our fallen world. And that's what the church is, but it's with charity, right? Like Christ, yeah, reaches out and lifts them up. And I know we talked about that in a previous episode, that the Bishop of Bridgeport used the same
Well,
analogy,
yeah, and
but trying
I
to,
wondered, like, how effective are those street preachers? Like, when we were in DC together, I saw them all the time. And in New York City, they're there just, with a megaphone on a literal, I don't think they're called soapboxes anymore, like a milk crate, and just like with a hand painted sign. And they're like shouting at people, like, we're all going to hell, and like, we need to change our lives, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know anyone, I've never seen anyone stop and listen and go, oh my gosh, this guy is so right. And like, I may agree with him, like yes, we need to change our moral behavior, but like shouting at people in the street may not be the most effective way of doing it. Like it's the one-on-one, it's relationships where we're broken in relationships and we're healed in relationships, right? And it's like it's easier to correct a friend, someone that you trust and knows that they care for you, rather than just like some random stranger shouting on the street that you're going to hell. And like you might be going to hell. That might be true, but there's no love in that message.
yeah, no, like Arthur Brooks has a line from his father. I think it says, "No one," or his grandfather. No one's ever said, "Oh, gee, it's great. There's missionaries on the front door," right? Like, like, um, it's always and like, yeah, it's how to be effective. And I think maybe this gets a little more like on my kind of empirical side of things, because I think like I remember a Dominican priest one told me, he said sometimes we focus too much on trying to win arguments than like converting hearts. And
See, Charles, Mister. Every
I don't think I was directed.
conversation is an argument.
Well, every conversation is an opportunity for me to correct you, is what I think it is. Even when I'm wrong, and I will double down on it. And, I'm on the sinking ship and saying, it's not sinking. Um, but yeah, it's just a little damp. Um, but yeah, but I think, yeah, that's what this whole point is it's not meant to win an argument and to chastise for the sake of, well, and then I think it's a problem the church can have is where we just throw out the negative and like deal with it. And it's like, no, we need to accompany and bring, and I think that's something that like Pope Francis was particularly poignant about, right? Like of encountering people and, trying to lift them up but I think, yeah, it's to be effective, right? Because if at the end of the day, our goal is to lead people to Christ and an authentic relationship with him and his church, we can't just being right isn't going to be enough. And so it's how do we do it effectively? It's the same with sales. Like if I go up and say, you need to do this, right? It's like, that's not going to be effective. If I say, oh, tell me about your needs, what's going on? Oh, we could fix this with this, right? You're going to be much more effective. What was it? There's a line in a movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, where he's like, sell me this pencil. And he takes the pencil and says, write something down like supply and demand, you need it, right? Which is crafty, but actually I saw a clip and so this makes it infallible. But the real Jordan Belfort was asked about that scene and he says, actually the more effective way to go about sales is ask someone like, well, how do you write? Like, oh, I use a pen. Is it ever a pain that you can't erase it? Oh, well, yeah. And you can't write on certain materials and all this stuff. And it doesn't work upside down. Yeah. It's like, well, have you tried a pencil? Or actually, I want to write down all my ideas. I don't have any way to do that. Well, here's a pencil, right? And so it's assessing the needs of where people are and having that dialogue and that conversation. And I think that's many ways the Christian life is I think everyone's longing for, right, our hearts are rested till they rest in thee, to quote Augustine. And so trying to understand what those shortcomings are, because I think the church is so great in its diversity and that what's attracted to different people to the faith and to relationship with Christ is not the same for everybody, right? But it's the same end is we're all trying to get to. And so it's almost like a sales mentality is how you have to approach that. But again, your goal is to help them and you're trying to provide value. It's not, I'm trying to convert people so I get a medal, right? Because we don't get medals for converting people, unfortunately.
If only.
If only. Yeah, I would be number one on the pyramid scheme. All right. The economy needs ethics in order to function correctly. Not any ethics whatsoever, but an ethics which is people-centered.
Amen. This is really important. I think Pope Benedict, this encyclical is so pro free market. Um, and he talks, I think, a little bit about the dangers of capitalism, but I think I've mentioned this on the show before, right? I had a moral theology professor who says we're very skeptical in the Church of isms, capitalism, socialism, and then I raised my hand. I said, "What about Catholicism?" And he's like, "Ha ha ha! There's always one." And I was like, "I'm proud to be the one." Um, but and I think this is the criticism of capitalism that it's so just metric based or get ahead. But the free market, which is a central tenet to capitalism, I believe, is really, really good, but it has to be guided by ethical principles, right? That are people centered, right? Like because ultimately the free market, I think, is the best system for uh, people to have this full and complete human development, um, and so to grow in the free passing of goods and exchange of goods and all this stuff with as limited regulations as possible. But the regulations, if any, are like quality control, making sure that products are, there's no lead in the plates that we're getting, um, or in the paint that we use. Um, and so I think that's the idea of it is like we want a free market, but it has to be guided first and foremost by the natural law, which is global and universal.
Well, it made me think of John Adams. Can you do John Adams in the voice of King George III? And speaking of accents,
My accents
from
are
Hamilton,
always either really bad or offensive.
you go John
John
Adams,
Adams.
right? Don't you remember
John
that?
Adams. I know him.
That didn't sound good. Oh yeah, he was the first ambassador to the Great Britain. Which, back to a previous episode, he was not an ambassador; he was minister to the court of St. James. So we did not appoint ambassadors until the I think early 20th or late 19th century because of monarchical reasons, which we can get. We're getting sidetracked. Sorry, stop distracting me, Father Sir. Anyways, but yeah, no, I think. Did I say the quote
No,
from
you did
John
not.
Adams, or did I just? John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other."
This comes up all the
And I think
time.
that's,
We've mentioned this a bunch of
I
times.
love this quote. That's why, yeah. But no, it's worth repeating. It's worth, and then John Paul, yeah, because we have a lot of freedom in this country, which is great, right? But that freedom is understood that we're not going to abuse it, right? Maybe we'll make mistakes and we'll do things we shouldn't, but we're not going to be, like if we are not moral and ethical in how we approach situations, then we do need a lot more coercion and the power of the state to say, wait a minute, you guys aren't doing this. You're just cutting corners and you're dangerous and you're hurting people. And we need to, kind of, adjust things. And so, I think it needs ethics in order to function correctly. And that's what gets to our Milton Friedman episode, right? Where he says the same thing. He says, yes, profit's the motive within an ethical framework. And I think that ethics is where the church can really help draw the lines, informed by 2,000 years of history. And even more than that, it's 2,000 years of Christian history, but it's informed by a Judeo tradition going back earlier and a Greco-Roman philosophical tradition, right? Like all the things that are great and true are great and true, like, and the church is allowed to talk about them. It's not just, oh, well, she just talked about it, we can't really talk about Plato or Aristotle. But yeah, the economy, the ethics in order to function, because we have to use our freedom carefully, and we have to think about all things. We can cut corners, right? Whether it's an individual employee who can lie in an expense report, or cheat a customer, or a corporation, or how it reports to regulators, or how its overall strategy is set. It's people centered, and I think people centered at the end of the day, like, and it's always cheeky when people say this, like, "Oh, it's a relationship business," right? But it is true. At the end of the day, it's people serving people, right? And how do we recognize that we need people to thrive and to be successful? As whether it's employees or customers or suppliers. All at the end of the day, these are all people. Economics is just the recognition of how humans behave in a market, right? And so it's humans. It's not amorphic robots doing their thing, which humans can occasionally intervene with. And so it has to be people centered, and we can't have an economy. Because it's a valid criticism of economists. Like, I remember I was once at a think tank lecture, and we had an economist who spoke and said, "Don't worry about automated driving, because the way it's going to displace truck drivers, and the fact that certain truck drivers are going to retire within this number of years, like, it'll be a blip in the economy." It's easy to be in economics to focus too much on GDP, right, or maximizing profitability, and not to recognize the individuals that make it. Because so the automated drivers. Then someone later said, well, it's easy for the economist to say that because he doesn't have to worry about it. He's just worried about GDP. But those are human lives. Those are families. Those are households, right, that are being impacted. And so innovation is good, but also how to manage it, how to think about it, how to recognize, we don't want to, everybody can be employed in agriculture if we're in subsistence farming, but that's not necessarily a thriving, environment as well. And so it's understanding that we need to take care of the people. And it is really important that we are people centered. We have those ethical framework, because it's not just, oh, GDP is going up, who cares, right? Or the stock market's going up, who cares, right? But are we making sure that everyone, including, I don't like quoting Franklin Roosevelt very much, if at all. But Franklin Roosevelt had a good quote. All right, he says, "The test of progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough to those who have too little." And I think that quote is okay. Be careful about anything else FDR said or did, because he's created a lot of problems that we're still dealing with 90 years later. But and I think capitalism, the free market, free enterprise system, it's shown this, that poverty in the free enterprise system is much more lower than it is in other systems, or much lower than other systems, and that those who are poor have been able to benefit and have a much higher quality of life under a free enterprise system, where they're benefiting from the innovation, from the employment, kind of a rising tide lifts all boats. I think this is a really important economic concept that people don't get, is that they think, oh, there's a billionaire, so he's taking $1 billion from somebody else, right? Or many other people. And it's like, that's not really how the economy works. It's not a pie where I get a big piece, you get a small piece, right? That's not how it is. In a zero-sum economy, that's how it would be. But we have what's called economic growth, right? The sum is greater than the parts, to use a philosophical understanding, where like Milton Friedman talks about a pencil, and maybe I've done this analogy before, but like all the compartment, you bring it all together, and the pencil's worth more than all the individual pieces, and um, it provides the value. And so we need to make sure that the people at the bottom, and the poorest in our country live better than most of the people in the world. And so that's good, and we want to keep helping them. But my concern is less about inequality as much as poverty, and I think that's more of a personal stake, right? Like, if there's people that are rich at the top, okay, right? Yes, if you're rich, you have a moral duty to donate, to support philanthropy. But the real measure of, is our economy working? Is it functioning? Is how are we dealing with eradicating poverty, extreme poverty? Are people able to afford, live, provide for themselves? And so that's to me the measure of an economy. But it's not. Some people, I think, want to help the poor by redistributing wealth from the rich through taxation, which I think you can redistribute wealth through value creation and making it, improve quality of life and lower costs of living and things
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think
Does that help,
it does,
Father
for
Mr.?
sure.
Yeah.
But also, I think this like people-centered idea of the economy and of markets relates to the Catholic social principle, which is I think fair to say is the favorite principle of the show, is the principle of subsidiarity, which Benedict talks a lot about. And I'm going to read for you uh, from paragraph 57, right? Um, a particular manifestation of charity and a guiding criterion for fraternal cooperation between believers and non-believers is undoubtedly the principle of subsidiarity, an expression of inalienable human freedom. Subsidiarity is first and foremost a form of assistance to the human person via the autonomy of intermediate bodies. Such assistance is offered when individuals or groups are unable to accomplish something on their own, and it always designed to achieve their emancipation because it fosters freedom and participation through assumption of responsibility. Subsidiarity respects personal dignity by recognizing in the person a subject who is always capable of giving something to others. By considering reciprocity as the heart of what it is to be a human being, subsidiarity is the most effective antidote against any form of all-encompassing welfare state. It is able to take account both of the manifold articulation of plans and therefore of the plurality of subjects, as well as the coordination of those plans. Hence, the principle of subsidiarity is particularly well suited to managing globalization and directing it towards authentic human development. In order not to produce a dangerous universal power of tyrannical nature, the governance of globalization must be marked by subsidiarity, articulated into several layers and involving different levels that can work together. I think we've talked about this before, but those who haven't listened to any other episodes, right? Like, welfare isn't always the best solution to poverty, and also can ignore the dignity of the human person because it takes away the value of work. And this is what he's saying, is that subsidiarity always recognizes that a person has something to give, they have something to offer, and that there's value in that, whether we measure it monetarily or through like their gifts and talents that they can offer to something, right? But St. Paul says this, right? The worker is worth their wage, right? That whatever you give somebody, whatever somebody gives, right, it should be repaid, whether it's with food or with the stuff. But like and I think we talked about this in our Friedman episode, right? Handouts, um, like the best thing that don't always work, they're not always effective. The best thing we can do as Christians is create more jobs and to give people that dignity of work. But subsidiarity is great because it takes us like it, we can't solve the global problems globally, right? Because each economy, each market, each town, each situation, each family is different. So that again, that relationship centered approach um, to to the free market needs to be uh, like first and foremost, again, people centered, not GDP centered.
Yeah, no. And actually, to quote Lyndon Johnson, again, I'm really quoting a lot of my, not so favorite people here in history, but President Johnson said when he launched the war on poverty, we want dignity and not doles, or we want to invest in dignity, not doles. Or maybe it was Sergeant Shriver said that at the launch, but one of the two of them was talking about it. And I think at the best, that's what, yes, the welfare scheme should be geared towards, is how do we enable human flourishing, not how do we treat a symptom, right? And I think I remember actually there was a Spanish priest at Catholic who gave a talk, and it really kind of lit a light. He said there's kind of two ways you can think about problems. You can either solve the symptom or you can solve the problem. right? And he's like, and I think too often we just want to get rid of the symptom, no problem, right? And it's like, well, did you actually fix it? Like poverty, all right, well, we just gave you money, now you're not poor, but like, are they actually being treated as, members of society, allowed to contribute, allowed to share their creativity in the market? Or are we just saying, oh, here's a check, it's from a faceless bureau, and oh, the check didn't come, and you got to like your number in a system, versus like, oh, this is, Miss whatever who's aged and infirmed, and the community comes together and visits and lets her talk to
It's
her cats or
there's
something, right?
this argument I think that a lot of people are making now that and they get a lot of backlash for it, but they say that if we were to redistribute all the wealth across all the people and that everyone started off with the same amount, that the rich would get rich again and the poor would be poor again, because the problem is not financial. The problem is not about money. The problem is cultural, um, which I think there's probably a lot of nuances and a lot of stats and a lot of things like that, right? And I think it's a lot of mindset and stuff, but and it's affected where you live and all those things. But I think that there is uh, kind of a mindset and a culture and an approach that would lend to that of like, okay, I have money now. What am I doing on? Like, we see this a lot in the urban cities in my area. Um, is that there are people who are really struggling with their houses and their payments and all that stuff, but they have BMWs, Audis, and all that stuff because the car is like a social status symbol. So it's like they may live in a not so great area or not so great house, but when they drive to their work or something, they have this status symbol that maybe living above their means, right? Or and so like that's the thing is like, is it about status and like what we're putting at like flashing our money? Or is it about like, I know I need to live in a suitable place where there are good schools and I can afford to send kids to school. And so maybe that means I drive a 2003 Toyota Corolla. Um, and it doesn't look always great, but at least we're set up in a place where I'm not living beyond my means. But also generating revenue, right? Like, I think financial literacy, I think would be a huge help too, right? It's like, um, Shaquille O'Neal talks about this all the time of how you get signed to you get drafted to the NBA, you get signed, you get $1 million check, and it's gone the next day. And so teaching guys like, no, you have to save. The government's going to take 40% of that. And somebody said this to me. I don't know if it was you or someone else, but it's like most people have their taxes taken out of their paycheck automatically, and so what they get week to week is kind of what they have, and that's their taxes. Other people like myself and maybe you, Charles, have to do this is like we have to pay the government. We have to report our finances and then pay the government. So like we have withholdings and everything like that. Someone said if everyone in the United States had to pay taxes and calculate their taxes, the tax system would change like that because you realize actually how much you're actually getting taxed. But you'd also like realize like I had to do that my first year here. I didn't withhold enough, and I owed the government a lot of money. And I was like, okay. I sat down with an accountant and I said, what's the plan? Like he looks at everything, he goes, okay, this is how much you have to withhold, this is how much you have to do. I recognize, right? Uh, Thankfully my accountant is very nice and he does it for free because he also as he looked at he told me what his fee was and then he looked at my taxes. He goes, yeah, I'll just do it. And I recognize that's maybe a clerical privilege um, that not everyone can do, but it is something that like we have to like financial literacy. I think is a big part of that, but um, again, it's like per community, per town, this idea of subsidiarity and understanding of like human flourishing, right? Like each person is their own circumstance, their own situation, and we have to help them where they're at, but also not create something that is dependent on, right? I think the really good psychologists will say like their job is to put themselves out of the job, right? Whereas other psychologists will like, oh, maybe you have this problem, or maybe we should talk about this, or like, what are you going to do without me? And it's just like, okay, well, now you're going to treatment so that this guy can get paid. Same thing with like welfare or like the lottery or stuff. It's just like, well, people are dependent upon us, and we can. This is our business. This is how we thrive. Rather than just saying like, like the goal of any welfare program should be to end.
Yes. No, I think it's an important one. Like, Milton Friedman, now quoting someone I do like, and again, I like all these people as human beings, but maybe some of their ideas and policies and thoughts are problematic. But Milton Friedman says we should judge a government program occasionally by its results and not by its intentions. And yeah, like you see so often, like, oh, we got this many more people on this program or this, and it's like, okay, these are good leading indicators, but are we really helping people get off of it, right? Because yeah, in theory, we want people to become self-reliant and productive members and to care for themselves, because when you own your success, you get to it's much more fulfilling. And yeah, like in Switzerland, you at least this is how I was told, I could be wrong if some Swiss person wants to write in, is that their taxes, it's like an annual bill, and it's like the opposite of the US where it's withheld. And so you are aware of what the tax burden is and making sure that it's spent responsibly, and that we're actually allowing people to flourish. And I think, yeah, that's the real goal. And yeah, keeping it local, because again, local communities have a much better versus like, sorry, you're not in the right zip code, or you make $1 below the threshold. Like, let community organizations which understand their individuals and what the situation is, and like, oh, sometimes someone just needs help with rent 1 month, and then they're back and they're fine, right? Like there was this guy who worked in Philly. I think he was like a pastor of like an African American church, and he worked with Paul Ryan on some stuff when Paul Ryan was in charge of Ways and Means Committee in the House. And he said there's kind of three types of poverty that we see in the world. And he says the first is those who can't take care of themselves. So they're mentally ill, they're elderly, they're infirm, they're disabled, right? And he said we as a society, we need to be taking care of these people because there's no other option. And I think that's very Christian to make sure that we're providing them with, the resources to live and to have, what they need to survive. Then they said the second one is there's these people who end up in a crisis, where, you get a flat, you have to get new tires. Why are tires so expensive? And you get new tires, and your water heater breaks, and you like whatever it is, like you have a preponderance of expenses that tie up, and next thing you know, you're getting evicted or whatever it is, and people aren't working with you. The system is too rigid. And then the third part is people who take advantage of a system that allows for you don't have to work because you can make more money on welfare or something. And how do we build the incentives and the structures where we give people the right, like, all right, you can't take care of yourself, we're taking care of you. That's easy to compartmentalize. You need help, all right, here's a temporary program, we're going to get you on your feet, right? Maybe you repay it, maybe you don't, right? Or whatever it is. And then, oh wait, our system's not working here because we're encouraging you not to participate in society. You're capable, you have the skills to be a member of our society, but and to contribute to the economy. But because of the way we set the program, it's encouraged you not to work because if you like, there's real challenges. Like I remember actually seeing this with when I was at the police, and we'd go into some lower income neighborhoods, and like there's this woman she said, I'm trying to find another man to have a kid with because I'll get a higher government check. And we're like, no. And that's a verbatim quote. It's like, you don't want to have, like, again, we don't want to have eugenics where we're depriving people of children, but like, she was doing it because she's like, well, if I look at the chart, it says I get an extra $500 a month when I have a kid. So another kid, then I'm going to have another kid. It's like, no, they're not paying you to encourage you to have kids. They're paying you because it costs more to have another kid. And but that financial literacy and being able to help people, and they're responding to those incentives that our system creates. And so it's how to get people out of it. But again, it's right. It's about that account. And I think that's why it's a challenge in a country. I think we tend to take the U.S. as a norm in the world, but really the U.S. is an exception. We're the wealthiest country in the world. We have a incredibly high standard of living. And we're also the third largest country by land area, the third largest country by population, right? We have 340 million people. And to try to come up with one size fits all solutions for 340 million people living in 50 states across 3 time zones or more if you count Hawaii, right? And that so we'll make sure the problems are local, as you talk about with the subsidiary. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a morally neutral kind of idea, right? Like this interconnectedness, like we're connected in a way of history that the whole world has never been connected before. And so with that becomes a lot of great advantages and also a lot of disadvantages, right? Because of how we do that, right? Like there's no longer like the Silk Road, right? That is like the main area of trade that we have to protect and defend and all those things, right? Because we're essential on people being able to go on this road safely so that we can purchase goods and silk and stuff, right? Or like the spice trade routes, right? Like now everything is so easy to get, right? now there's like overnight shipping with Amazon, and 2-day shipping is the standard, right? Like, um, but with that comes a great cost, right? Like of because everything's are so easy, right? Like it's like, okay, well we can make things cheaper in Asian countries, but they don't because they don't have the labor laws that we have. But then we're exploiting human workers so that I can have a cheap $10 undershirt. It's like, okay, maybe that is a downside of globalization. Um, right. And like that's like now, like we talk about this with and all those who are running for office now, right? Of like keeping American industries, right? But that comes with a great cost. But it's hard to find a product that's like exclusively made in the United States. Um, and so it's great, right? We have all these resources. Like I can get tea from England and no problem, and not sweat a brow, not right, or all this stuff. This is also the problem with tariffs that we've kind of touched on in the Milton Friedman episode. It was like the imports and exports, and like it creates more than just like a trade problem, right? It creates it affects war and all these things and relationships and stuff. So again, with it has to be principled and people centered. Otherwise, it's a great gift and a great thing. It provides lots of opportunities, but it also can be very ugly and detrimental to societies and people that we never see or even think of.
Yeah, no, it's a good point because yeah, globalization. I tend to lean more and it's good, but there's a Marcus Aurelius quote, right, which is life is neither good nor bad, but a place for good and bad. I would argue life is good, but and same with like people say, oh, it's bad. Like, is social media really bad, or is it just it has an ability to be
Yeah,
abused,
those
right?
are
Like,
morally
I would say a
neutral.
lot of things, like right, yeah, like fried food is it good or bad? Well, it's good in moderation. Right? Everything's good in moderation. Globalization is good in moderation. I'd say you can have more globalization than you think you need. Because yeah, I think it creates a lot of opportunities. It creates cheaper goods. But also it creates, and this is something I don't think we fully appreciate, is that it's been a long, the Pax Americana, as it's called, right? The last time that the great powers of the world were at war was in 1945, and um, that's an incredible feat. And part of it is because we're trading with a lot of the people that are the other great powers. And so, right, one of our largest trading partners is China. And so, if we were to go to war with them, we both have a lot to lose, right? And livelihoods and economics in economic terms. Versus if we were completely isolated and we had a friction, it would be more apropos. It'd be a lot easier to get into a conflict when the consequences are maybe, I mean, they're still terrible in war, but they can be a little more isolated or compartmentalized. And so the more we trade, the more we're relying on each other, the more we have to work together as a society because we can't make our goods, they can't make their goods. Our societies cannot exist without each other. And so the trade it forces that collaboration. But globalization does create a lot of opportunities. And I think at the same time, though, it is a bit of a double edged sword. Like I think what Thomas Sowell said in economics, there's no solutions, only trade offs. And so, like, oh yes, we can get cheaper things made in Southeast Asia, and I would quarrel with even it's the labor laws. Like sometimes it's lower cost of living, therefore lower cost of labor. And yes, there are obviously a lot more lax labor laws, but maybe we have too high of labor laws here into certain things. And like I remember with the Nike sweatshop, right? It was a very controversial. Nike came out and they were like, look at how people are making Nike shoes. And they closed the plant that was in the article, right? And Nike stopped working with them. But what they didn't realize is that before the Nike plant, people literally their day job was like you'd go wander around a landfill looking for scrap metal to sell. And then after Nike closed the plant, what did they do? They went back to a landfill looking for scrap metal. And so, not saying like, oh, well, a sweatshop's better than looking in a landfill. Well, it is, but also like, how do we, there are variations of where it's like we're not endorsing exploiting people or unsafe or dangerous labor conditions, but also understanding that there's trade-offs and there's challenges when you start to get too far one way or the other. So, and then there's a third part about this is unrelated to technology. So, all right, but that's I think relevant with AI and stuff going on with technology.
It's true. I think AI is obviously a big concern of Pope Leo and the like, right, going from the Industrial Revolution, Leo the 13th, to now the technological AI revolution, if we can call it that, with Leo the 14th, and this kind of over 100-year span now of like just technology r- being uh, produced and developed at such rapid speeds, right? Like imagine like the technology that we grew up with in the 90s versus like the how fast technology is developing now in the 2020s. It's like leaps and bounds, right? How fast, like in the 90s, like an iPhone was probably unimaginable. Um, and so it is a great aid to human development, right? Like the the cotton gin, and other different types of technology, the assembly line that Henry Ford uh, established. Shout out to Michigan, um, and all those other technologies, right? That they made productivity and things so much more available, right? High quality, but cheaper to produce and stuff. And those things are great. But yeah, like AI jobs or AI taking the place of like human relationships and certain things, like that's something to be really skeptical of. Like AI is definitely a tool that can be used, but it has to be used as a tool and you can't replace it as a person. I think this is the problem we see, like especially teenagers and stuff who are using ChatGPT or other things for like therapy, um, or um, yeah, you see it in terrible situations, but like it can't replace that human interaction. And that's the joke. You sent me a monk, a robot just became a monk, a Buddhist monk, I think somewhere, and you're like, they're coming for your job. You thought you had security. I was like that's like the craziest thing. And like you see these monks who are just, it's like, who created a robot to like their sole purpose is to like meditate? And I'm like what? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It seems, I don't understand it at all, and I don't think I can. Um, I like using AI for certain things. Um, it helps, especially like summarizing things or connecting points or stuff like that. But even then, you have to be hesitant because there was this man where I was using it for a week, and then I realized like I don't know what to do, and so like I challenged myself to do like, okay, I have to sit down with this and think this through myself, and I can't use AI. Well, and then, which is good because then it challenges you, but then it makes you realize like I can't use this for this kind of thing, um, because it could go down a very dangerous road, very slippery slope. And I mean, the things people are saying about AI, the people who invented it, like it's scary. They're like, we don't know how to control it. Like, is Terminator real? Mm.
Yeah, no, I think technology, yeah, it's pro and con because yeah, there's been different, and it's always hard to see the opportunity. I was talking about the friend this last night, the opportunity that comes from a technological innovation, right? Because like the advent of the automobile, up until then, the entire human history was not entire human history, but most of it was based on a horse-based economy, right? And all of a sudden, we had a Model T come out that was affordable and reliable, and people were able to do it. And so wait, what does this mean for people who raise horses, who make buggies, who make buggy whips, who make saddles, right? Who take care, who turn old horses into glue and clean up the streets, right? And all these things. Like there's a whole facet of the economy that was being displaced. And I think it's kind of the rate of displacement, how we manage it, that's a challenge. Because one option is we just put our head in the sand, but then it's like, well, what about the opportunities for technology to cure cancer? Right, to process large volumes of information, to find things, to save a lot of time. It's but the can atrophy. Like I think it's Aristotle who complained about the invention of books. And he says people are not going to remember anything anymore because they'll just know they can go look it up in a book. And it's like that was however long ago when Aristotle was wandering around doing Aristotelian things. But yeah, with AI, like navigation, right? I do not really know how to get around. I mean, I know how to get around Alexandria, Virginia, where I live. I don't know all the street names. But like if I was having to drive somewhere, I almost always put it in. And sometimes it's because I have no idea where I'm going, right? I mean, I know the destination, I don't know how to get there. Other times it's like, well, it knows traffic, it knows construction, it knows when there's a motorcade and they're closing a road or whatever. And so it can respond to that. And I could spend all my free time learning all the minutia of DC traffic patterns and construction, read every report. And it's like, but it saved me that having to know that. And so it's a fine line. Like, yeah, we don't want to atrophy. And that's why I think it's important in like particularly elementary schools and early schools, right, to like learn how to handwrite, even though I have not handwritten anything for work other than my notes, right? Like I've never handwritten a paper and given it to my boss or to an employee or a customer or something. But it's important to know how to type too. And so it's making sure you have those skills, and yeah, you're not overly reliant to where like I always say, like, when the power's out, it's amazing how boring like life gets instantly, right? It's all of a sudden, or like the Wi-Fi is down, and you're like, what do I do? And you realize, wait, we've only had like electricity widespread in the United States for like a little over 100 years, and so Um, like that's how most of humans live, but it's like power's out. I can't watch TV. I can't, now you can use your phone because it's charged, right? But and then the phone dies. You're like, what do I do? And like, can I read a book by candlelight? It's like, that's how people read books all the time. And so, yeah, I think it's important to recognize that technological innovation occurs and it will occur, and not to be afraid of it, but to recognize the responsibility. Like, I think George Orwell was asked, or maybe it was another dystopian author, who said, like, do you think the future is going to be terrible? And he says, no, I'm writing to make sure it isn't terrible. And that was his thought, is that, like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of dark things that could happen with AI, as we've seen in lots of movies, but there's also a lot of opportunities. And it's important we have the right safeguards, the right controls, and the right awareness of this. And I think AI is particularly nuanced because it replaces a lot of what the modern, like, again, 99% of human economic activity was based on agriculture up until the Industrial Revolution. And so we've really been, in the United States particularly, an information-based economy, right? And that's where, like, the financial capital of the world. We put out a lot of great research in our universities, and AI directly gets at the heart of that. But at the same time, like, the value of plumbers and electricians and landscapers is still going to be around, because robotics cannot as easily replace that in AI. And also, AI is a great democratizer. Like, I was using it, like, I had to contest a health insurance thing. It was my silly thing with my dentist. I have great dentists, but, like, they denied part of the whatever the annual cleaning stuff, and so I had to, like, I put it in AI, the explanation of benefits, and my, explanation of what coverage I have. And I was like, what do I do? And it said, well, here's a letter you write. This is these are the terms you need to refer to. And it's kind of like, in The Incredibles, right? He works in health insurance, and, like, the old lady comes to him and is like, gets denied. Yeah, like, I'm not telling you you have to go to floor 13 and request a WH64 form and, like, talk to Ned and say, like, but, like, I had all of a sudden, like, a lawyer, right, and a health insurance expert help me navigate that. And I think people tend to look at AI, like, I think chefs are like, well, it's going to give you recipes. You're not going to learn how to cook. You're not going to learn all the minutia. And then, like, authors, like, you're not going to learn how to write. Like, whatever you value, you think AI is going to take away because you like doing that. But, like, so I think lawyers are more concerned about people using it for legal advice and doctors using it for medical advice. But it can help you with that. And again, it was a lot cheaper than me, like, I don't know, hiring a healthcare consultant or having to pay the small amount for my dental care that was denied by my insurer. But now it's like, oh, here's the letter I have to send. Here's how I follow up, and here's what I have to say. But again, it's how you approach that with that freedom, and also making sure you still don't lose the muscle memory of,
Yeah, it
the
reminds
brain
me,
working.
C.S. Lewis wrote a space trilogy, and it was a series of three fiction books about, like, science fiction, right? And he had, so people were asking about space exploration and all these things that were happening, and he said he was deadly afraid of going into space. And he was asked why, and he goes, because I think right now where we are in the world, we're just going to take the bad things that are in this world and then just send it out into the universe. And he said that's really, really dangerous. And so he wrote a space trilogy about how if we went into space, what would happen if that happened, but then how the good that we can send out into the universe, the good things of humanity, and what that can accomplish. And so I think that's a really mature and insightful mindset, is like, AI is like, if we put bad things into AI and, like, the selfishness and, like, all those things, like, it'll be there. But we can also put the good out into the technology, and to cure cancer, to help people with jobs, right? To give people a use of limbs again, and all that stuff. Like, that's really, really good. It does need to be limited, but again, going back to the first thing that we talked about, right? And regulated by a moral principle. And it has to be people centered, not like AI centered or efficiency centered, or anything like that. So yeah, put more good into the world, people.
Aw, it should be a T-shirt, right? Probably Hitler, put more good in the world. I never thought you'd say that. So, yeah, but no. So this is, but yeah, Caritas, those are all the quotes that AI had given us
We
to
put
talk about. It's interesting,
we
a good
taught
deeper.
AI to read this encyclical. So we're, if anything, we're teaching it how to it should act.
We're instructing the ignorant. Yeah. Yes. But no, I think this is a good encyclical. Is it encyclical? Is it an apostolic letter? It's a encyclical letter. So from Benedict. So it's a good one to read, to check out, because I think to me, the crux of it, at least remember in econ when we talk about it or think about it, is that recognizing we don't just want to have material solutions when we are not just material beings, right? And so to understand that there's a deeper part of human experience, and we have to make sure we're servicing all. We can't just say, "Oh, here's food. Here's all your, what is it? Food, shelter, clothing, right? And you're fine." It's like, yeah, but you're missing something. There's still that human element, and how do we approach people and treat them with dignity, and try to make sure material progress and is suited to support humanity. I think this is one of those great things where the church, with its wisdom of 2,000 years plus of history, is able to apply a lot of the lessons, because it's gone through revolutions and advancements, right? When there was trade going on in the Italian peninsula and how that informed, and have the church thought about it and recognized it and learned. It's like a great, expert in humanity. Is that your quote you have from C.S. Lewis or
Paul VI.
somebody? Uh,
The
Paul the
church is an
Sixth.
expert in humanity.
Close to see. Yes, and so having that, being able to share. So, anything else on Caritas and Veritate for the moment, sir?
Covers the highlight points. It's a good summer reading. If you're looking for something to bring to the beach, it's one of the longer ones, but easy. Like all Pope Benedict stuff, it's easy to read. The book version I have is 157 pages. Light afternoon reading. Great beach book. But as always, like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you're supposed to do with these things. And until next week, work hard and pray harder.